Hello Wingmen, this is Tallymouse. Not Mickey Mouse nor Danger Mouse, but Tallymouse. Let me preface this video by telling you why I have been waiting since October 24th, 2021 for the Pimax Reality 12K headset. As per Pimax's usual notation, and now also Shiftall's, an 8K headset is called such because it consists two 4K panels, or has a single panel that provides 4K resolution per eye, or 8,294,400 pixels per eye. When I initially heard about the 12K, I thought, well, that must mean it's 6K per eye. On a traditional 2D screen, that would relate to 6016 by 3384 pixels, or over 20 million pixels per eye. Evidently, this would be a 2.5 times increase on the number of pixels on an 8K headset. The 12K was also announced to boast 200 degrees of horizontal FOV, along with 135 degrees of vertical FOV, which would require a compound lens that likely had a glass aspheric located within a plastic Fresnel outer to achieve such a shockingly high FOV. Initially, it was postulated that the 20 million pixels spread over such a large FOV would result in a pixel per degree value of around 35, just like the current Pimax Crystal and Crystal Light. The binocular overlap of 118 degrees also seemed like overkill, especially considering that most people cannot tell the difference between 85 and 90 degrees of overlap anyway. It boasted inside-out tracking with 4 integrated cameras, hand, face and full body tracking options, which would be great for VR chat, but I don't do VR chat and it appears to be filled mostly with cats, and that is not a safe environment for a mouse. So from the perspective of an avid simmer, I have always wanted more resolution, more FOV, and more brightness. My ultimate headset would have a PPD as close to human eye resolution as possible, which is equivalent to about 60 ppd. Enough FOV to mean that you either never notice the dark border, or you cannot even see it if you try, and a bright enough panel that you'd feel like you're actually outside, i.e. looking at the sun in VR is painful to the eyes, and bright glints of reflections from objects are just like they are in real life. With regards to display systems, you will note that human field of view is around 95 degrees away from the nose, 60 degrees towards the nose, 75 degrees downwards, and 60 degrees upwards. That translates to around 180 degrees of horizontal field of view and 135 degrees of vertical field of view, which makes the 12K's 200 degree horizontal field of view somewhat pointless unless they're planning on appealing to the chameleon consumer base, which has a total accessible market worldwide of around $0. You may have seen values for the human field of view of 220 HFOV and 150 vertical FOV, but those are the absolute extremes of human vision. So when the Pimax Super was announced with its bright screen, 57 pixels per degree optics, and 120 degree horizontal FOV, I started to wonder what quantum leap would the 12K actually offer. I was so intrigued that I took 2 days off work, gave Spirit Airlines the content of my wallet, and jumped on a plane to Vegas to go and see the Pimax Crystal Super for myself, spend some quality time with it, analyze it, and report back to my fellow wingmen. I landed just before 7 AM and was at CES 2025 by 7:30 AM, a whole 90 minutes before it officially opened. Being the first at the Pimax stand, I was greeted by Ing, Pimax's COO, and Yop, Pimax's chief yogic flyer. I was very pleased to see that Pimax had a number of demonstration setups, most with motion platforms and with a high focus upon simming and PC VR. DCS, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and a lot of sim racing setups. The setups were a mix between Crystal Lights and Crystal Supers. After a brief coffee and donut break, Reinhard Roscher appeared along with his colleague, longtime friend, and all-round dude, Rainer. Reinhard and Rainer were there to demo their VR software that permits you to drop pretty much any 3D model you can think to import and walk around and inspect it in VR. They were quick to drop the Super onto my head for a demo. The Super is almost the same size as the Reverb G2, albeit very slightly wider, and a very similar weight when picking both up simultaneously. The Super now has the option of a silicone face gasket that connects magnetically, and I found this to be more comfortable than the Crystal's foam face gasket. Starting from the adjustment screw on the back of the headset and moving to the upper one located at the top of the forehead, and then finalizing on the eye relief screw, I found that I could easily get my pupils located in 3 dimensions into the sweet spot of the lenses, and this is critical to reduce any evident chromatic aberrations and eye strain. I know other headsets have featured a to and fro lens adjustment in the past, but this implementation was significantly less clumsy than having to change between face foam thicknesses to find a good match. Reinhard and Rainer had both bought bespoke laptops, both containing a 4090. One nice feature of the laptop was that it had ports for a fluid cooling loop for the 4090, which were, however, not required for this test. Due to some software development currently being finalized by Tobii, the eye tracking had been disabled in Pimax Play for the Super by Pimax, as they were concerned that any job still in progress glitches would become a distracting issue for visitors at CES, which was somewhat reminiscent of when the OG Crystal initially launched, as that too didn't have eye tracking enabled. However, Pimax stated they are confident that the Super will initially ship with the eye tracking functionality as solid as it currently is on the OG Crystal. Of the 4 Pimax Supers which I tried at CES, each one had various firmware and distortion profile revisions, as it appeared that the dev team were working so feverishly on finalizing the firmware that not all headsets had been updated that morning. On the 57 ppd headset connected to Reinhardt's laptop, we played with WIM FOV, Test HMD, and Relo Virtual. In Relo Virtual, Reinhardt, with his orc-like 58mm IPD, achieved a vertical FOV of 95.5 degrees and a horizontal FOV of 116 degrees. I followed suit with my somewhat average IPD of 64mm, and that expectedly resulted in a 96 degree vertical field of view and 118 degree horizontal field of view. I'm sure that somebody with an IPD larger than 64mm will easily achieve the stated 120 degrees field of view quoted by Pimax. Also, that the distortion profiles are continually being worked on, so the final values may end up being plus or minus 2 degrees or so, depending on how they crop the projected image. The binocular overlap was around 90 degrees, which is excellent, especially for those who are sensitive to overlap. Typically, anything above 85 degrees results in diminishing returns, as the requirement for human stereoscopic vision doesn't require 100% overlap. The panels are the same panels that are used within Vario's XR4, which in Europe is almost 4 times the price of the Crystal Super. The display is exceptionally bright, which I absolutely love. I want to wince slightly when looking at the sun while in sim, it's natural. When looking at very bright scenes, such as clouds or a white floor, with brightness set to 100%, a faint mirror can be noted. Knowing that the inconsistencies in brightness between neighbouring pixels is typically non-linear with respect to brightness, the engineer in me immediately knocked down the background brightness in Pimax Play to 97%, and hey presto, the mirror was so substantially reduced that it wasn't even noticeable during normal gameplay, unless you were in forensic detective mode and really looked for it. However, the same could be said for the majority of VR headsets I've ever owned or tried. There will always be something slightly not perfect if you go out of your way to look for it. This is one of the hardest tasks as a reviewer, being able to objectively look at a product through the same eyes as a consumer would and experience the product as they would without any additional unnecessary critique. Imagine being a dental hygienist. Dating people must become a nightmare. you'd be constantly looking at their teeth and feeling revolted during a date, only to finish the night out insisting on taking them home so you can tie them to the bed and clean their teeth with an ultrasonic pick. Not once in the 2 days I was playing with the Super did the inside-out tracking have a glitch. Everything was very stable. All of the Supers had the basic off-the-air sound solution installed. However much I appreciate that Pimax offers an integrated sound system, the basic S-Mass ear solution is just nowhere near as good as the KD-Mass or D-Mass headphones. It was noticeable during the CES, especially because the background of the show was almost deafening. I trialed DCS a number of times on a system that had an AMD 7900 XTX. Without eye tracking enabled, DFR wasn't an option, so the system was being run at 75% native resolution. Even at 75% resolution, the Super feels very similar in clarity to the OG Crystal or the Crystal Lite running at 100% resolution and using quad views to super sample the foveate region to 150%. This makes sense somewhat because the two former crystals have a resolution of 2880 by 2880 pixels per eye, that's 8,294,400 pixels, and the Super has a per eye resolution of 3,840 by 3,840 pixels per eye, or 14,745,600 pixels per eye. That's a 77% increase in the number of pixels. I cannot wait to see how the Super looks with the super sample quad views foveate region while running at 100% native resolution. It promises to be absolutely spectacular. It's important to note that I did not witness any barrel distortion whatsoever on any of the Supers that I tried, as I went to great lengths to ensure that my IPD was dialed in and that I'd set the headset up correctly. That said, Pimax will most likely continue to finesse the distortion profiles over the coming months, and these can be updated via over-the-air firmware and software updates. One of the difficulties for any reviewer when witnessing a pre-production technology at CES is that they do not have the time to set up the device like they would do at home. Typically, many reviewers will put the headset on for less than a minute, use somebody else's IPD, look around an environment that they might not be used to, and then have to make a decision call based on that experience alone. This is why I made the decision to spend at least 2 days with the headset and with noble and balanced wingmen such as Reinhardt, Rainer, Linus Sebastian, VR headset historian and Farmer True, as we managed to find time to dig deep and try to find out what the Super is ultimately going to be. As far as I can see, the hardware generally seems polished and ready to go. They'll need to do some fine-tuning to the software in addition to getting on top of finessing the Mura. However, from somebody who has worked with research and development of a lot of display and detector systems in their life, I know that this is fully solvable using standard industry techniques. Pimax has recently changed their lens manufacturer due to the issues that they had with the early Crystal Light lenses, and so it isn't anticipated that they'll have similar issues with the Super. I also got to handle the micro OLED optical stack, which is also the core of the Crystal Dream Air 2. So the technology is clearly there. Now all Pimax has to do is steal a couple of product designers from Apple so they can make it look sleek and sexy like an Apple Vision Pro. Albeit being a PCVR headset, that's about half of the cost of the AVP. Well, that's it for now, wingmen. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to drop them into the comments section below. Until next time, wingmen.